I always say to people that when you're designing a product, you need to first bring in your team, first your marketing team, the branding team, and then communications. Most of the time, people have the marketing team and then maybe the branding team, because you have to do all the packaging. But you forget that you have to communicate this to your audience. So the communication is not at the forefront of what they have to do. And then the product goes into the market. There is no preparedness in the case of crisis. There is no policy to say, if we have this crisis, this is how we handle it. So it's the way most companies usually handle communications. They put communication at the back seat. They don't consider communications to be a strategic role.
Welcome back to Just Africa. Now, across Africa today, companies are growing faster than ever. Banks, telecoms, fintechs, energy firms, manufacturers, and creative startups. But while business activities is rising, public trust in corporations remain fragile. Scandals, poor communications, weak customer engagement, and reputational crises often overshadow innovations and growth. Now, this raises a critical question. Is Africa facing a trust deficit in its corporate sector, and can strategic communication and branding fix it? Today, we explore reframing Africa's corporate narrative through communication, branding, and trust building. All right, we have a guest right here on Just Africa. Today, we will be discussing reframing Africa's corporate narrative through communication and branding and trust building. Joining us to unpack this robust topic is Gloria, Kafui, Agbomadzi, corporate communications, marketing, and brand management professional. So glad to have you today on Just Africa, Gloria.
It's really good to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
All right, so now, why do many companies still struggle with public trust? I mean, I give an analogy about how some companies, if you remember way back, I don't want to mention the name, there was a particular noodles that was rumored to have had some substance poisonous. And, people stopped eating that noodles for a while until, it took years of rebranding and all that. That was a trust deficit right there. So what could you say is the problem, and how would you rate the trust of consumers as to manufacturers these days?
First, I think I would start with from the roots, which is usually the design of the product. When we are designing the product, do we bring on board our corporate communications team, professionals, to help us look into this product before we take them into the market? Designing a product, because I always say to people that when you're designing a product, you need to first bring in your team, first your marketing team, the branding team, and then communications. Most of the time, people have the marketing team and then maybe the branding team, because you have to do all the packaging. But you forget that you have to communicate this to your audience. So the communication is not at the forefront of what they have to do. And then the product goes into the market. There is no preparedness in the case of crisis. When something happens, what do you do? There is no policy to say, if we have this crisis, this is how we handle it. So it's the way most companies usually handle communications. They put communication at the back seat. They don't consider communications to be a strategic role. Whereas it's the most strategic position, it's the most strategic business unit an organization can have. So putting it at the back burner, it's what is killing most organizations. So when something happens, they are being reactive instead of being proactive. Most of the organizations that are proactive towards communications, that have that unit well positioned within their organizations, are the ones who win when there is case of crisis.
All right, so if I may ask you now, how important is communications as to branding, marketing, side by side, these things?
It is very important, first. And the reason it is very important is because what we are doing now is communication. So, right? Branding is all of this you have seen. It is the body language. It is the packaging. That is branding. We can already see it, people can see it, right? But how do you interpret it? Because if you leave anything open to interpretation, I see things differently because we all have different backgrounds. So if you don't then tell your story, your narrative, the way you want it to be told. It leaves people to perceive it or interpret it the way they want it. So organizations then need to intentionally or deliberately tell their own brand stories. That is where communication comes in, to say, okay, we have done all of this branding. It looks good. We've used yellow, the colors and all of that. They are still the basic part of branding, right? We have brand values. We have internal culture. We have the external things that we want. We have stakeholders that we need to speak to and all of that. All of that, we've already positioned. We already know something we need to do. But how do we then tell that story? That is where communication comes in. And that story needs to be told, like I said, intentionally, purposefully, and it needs to be told to the right audiences. So that's how much communication is important. You cannot put it at the back burner.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gloria. I love the fact that you said you have to tell the story intentionally. But that is one thing African companies are really not doing right now. Because most companies we are allowing foreign companies to tell our stories for us. And of course, they are not saying it the right way.
Yeah, of course.
You understand?
Definitely.
So now the question is, what is holding African companies back? What is depriving us from telling our stories by ourselves? And some of the stories African companies are telling us, they are either defensive or they tell it halfway. Because they feel they do not want to lose customers, or they do not want to lose collaborations, so they don't want to tell it the way it should. What is holding African companies back?
Well, I think if you ask me, at first I thought nothing is holding us back, because if we want to do it, then we go ahead and do it. Because when I was prepping for this subject yesterday, I thought to myself, Africa has a lot of stories, right?
Yeah.
And I think I would praise the corporate, the companies. I mean, that's the private sector, for what they've done so far in telling Africa stories to the world. For example, Afrobeat, our entertainment sector, it's a big part of what the private sector has been doing in telling our stories to the world. Right? So, I mean, I would give them their flowers, because they've done a lot in telling our stories. Let's be honest. Yes, they are doing a lot of work. So this is where, right, we need public sector support in telling these stories right. We have all of these beautiful stories to tell. We have, but then we don't partner. There needs to be, not like we don't partner. We've been seeing partnerships, but they need to be upscaled. Right? They need to be scaled in such a way that we are intentionally telling the stories. Our festivals, our culture, even the infrastructure, even the work we are doing, even what we are doing in tech. Now, I take tech as an example. Tech in Nigeria, as in Rwanda and some African countries, have been making waves in the global space, right? And that's because they are telling that stories right. We are not just sitting down and looking for people to tell the stories for us. We are going out there and telling the stories. We are having summits, we are having conversations, we are having different ways to tell that story ourselves. And you can see that Africa is now having a big space, now has this big space in the global environment. So that's what we should be looking at working on. So we still have a number of sectors that need to start telling that story right. Like we can already see case studies and successes in other sectors like entertainment, right? So yes, entertainment and tech. So we still have to push for other sectors to do the same.
Okay, so what do we stand to gain or lose if we tell the story right, and if we do not tell it right? I know that if we don't tell the story right, we stand to lose some things. And when we tell it right, we stand to gain some things. So what do we stand to gain and lose when the story is well told and when it is not well told?
When your story is well, I think it's a no-brainer, right? That if you tell your story right, first, you're able to build trust.
Yes.
Right? Trust in the sense that people usually, for organizations, for example, people trust brands that they know and have built a connection with. Excuse me. and I built a connection with over time. But when a brand decides not to tell their story and leaves it to whoever, I mean, then they disappear. Like I said, you would really disappear, because there are people who are then actively telling their stories, but you decide to stay at the back burner, so you will lose trust, right? Another thing that brands are meant to lose is revenue. So we are leaving a lot of revenue on the table by not telling your story well, because like I say, if you package this product well, I was saying something about Aba market.
Yeah.
There was a certain project that I wanted to do, and then told some group of people to go to Aba, and then they produced some materials, the finishing of these materials, right? And I'm like, this is a whole, and it was in bulk, right? But then when they brought it, there was no branding, there was no tag, there was nothing on it, right? And nobody would know that this thing is coming from Aba. You see the kind of shoes that they make, right? Nigeria, for example, has one of the best leathers in the world. I don't know if you know that. One of the best leathers in the world. Very well sourced for, right? How are we packaging and branding and telling the stories from sourcing, from the raw materials, from production and all of that? How are we telling the stories of how these things come about, right? And how are we then taking them to the world? I tell you, right, for example, we should have a fashion show for the Aba guys, right? Honestly, you should have a fashion show. Paris, for example, if you go to Paris now, and you see all of these shops and how valuable their product is, and we are buying them for thousands of dollars, right? Whereas you would see the same products made by the same human beings, right? Even sometimes the same materials, or even higher value materials, and they are sold for less here, because we are not packaging and branding and telling our stories better. So that is where branding comes in. That is where communication comes in. Making sure that even after we've, so you lose revenue, right? I think that is where we are. So I don't digress too much, right? You lose revenue. We are trying, yes, to make sure that Nigeria revenue increases. How do we increase it? Is by telling our stories better. I think we are opening our eyes to this. A lot of people have been talking about it, both private and public sectors. And then I know that in the future we would see more improvement in how Africa companies, African institutions tell their stories.
All right, so this is where I even want to go right now. Let me not use you as a practical example. Just say someone random. If you give someone an imported leather bag, I don't want to mention any of the names, the person is happy. But if you give that same person a leather bag from where you told us about something, there's this. So my question now is, how does public perception affect business success, especially in Africa?
I think I've mentioned it earlier, right? It's part of the storytelling. It's part of the narrative that we've already backed this product with. Like I said, you are developing your product, whatever it is you're developing, right? You already know, look at your earring, very beautiful one, right? I already see it and I have a story behind it. Can everyone on the street connect with that story? We have a new generation of people coming up, right? How are we connecting them with the stories that we tell? Because with time, new generations keep coming up. If we don't keep is it upgrading our story in such a way that connects with them, then we lose that value. So your question then is, how do
public perception, how does it affect business success?
Yeah, so the public perception is now the story, yes. Like I think I've already answered. It's then the story that you put behind it. And that's what shapes the public perception. And when the public perception is right, your business then also benefits from it. But then when you build the wrong perception, I don't think a business comes out and say, okay, I want to build the wrong perception, right? So it's usually not about what they are not doing, but about what they are doing. And what they are doing is not acting. What they are doing is not telling their stories right. right? So we need to start telling stories. We need to start no matter, and I mean, in this digital age, it's become very easy for us to tell our stories. It's become actually very easy. You can use social media to tell your stories. SOUQ TV is on YouTube.
Yes.
You can watch SOUQ TV on YouTube. So it's easy for you to create assets, platforms for you to tell your stories. We need to start creating those platforms. That's why communications then is having a dedicated communications unit is important. Sometimes it starts as small, from my experience, it starts as a small thing that you are doing.
Yes.
You are doing some social media management here, you are doing some digital marketing, you are doing some content marketing here, sometimes just email and all of that. But all of this put together are reaching different audiences, telling different audiences stories that can connect with them. You understand? So at the end of the day, if we are not then building that perception through the small, little stories, how do we then do it when the bigger story comes? It's harder to connect. So that's why it's an everyday thing. It has to be done every day. And you cannot rest on that as an organization. You need to keep telling the stories. Yes, a number of organizations are doing that. But I spoke to someone recently and he said, well, I don't have the energy to do social media. But you have a business and you don't have the energy to do social media. Bro, you're going to do social media. Yes, whether you like it or not, because that is where your audience is. Everybody is on social media now, right? That is where you're building the perception. Every day I come on board and I go online and I see this particular, and the algorithm is now built for you to see what you want, what you really want to connect with, right? Things that really matter to you. So I open my Instagram and I'm seeing something that really matters to me. And what I'm seeing is positive. Over time, that builds something you call affinity, love for this brand, because that is where your CSR comes in. So it's not just about brand, because some brands will just still go ahead and want to sell to you. You don't do branding, you don't do just selling these days. What you want to do is to make sure that you are putting your brand stories out instead of just selling. People want to know your brand more than your product. Your brand, your product is there. Leave it. Let it do its thing. But then focus maybe 70% of your attention on building that brand, telling your brand stories. And how do you connect? Sometimes CSR is one of those things that you can do to connect with your target audience. And CSR now has evolved to ESG. To ESG, right? Where we are more concerned about how are we connecting with how are we taking care of our environment, how are we taking care of people socially, how is governance generally taking care of concerned with all of these things that we are doing in terms of communicating and all of that. So yes, communication, perception matters. And we need to continue doing this work to build that perception. If you don't build it as an organization, like I said, you disappear.
Thank you very much, Gloria. I will still be on the line of the question Olumide asked now. He asked it from the perspective of the people. Now, I want to ask that same question from the perspective of product owners, brand owners. I love the fact that you're a brand manager, so you understand this. Now, I will use your Abba as another instance. They produce quality shoes. They do produce quality stuff. And you find out that they put a label from outside the country. For instance, you see something that is made in Nigeria and you see China. Exactly. That's because they don't even have confidence in their own product. That is one. Then I have seen a man, there is this popular mall that is everywhere now, and their bread is nice. People go for their bread. You know what he does? He buys their bread, remove the bread from their bag and put it in his own nylon.
Packaging.
Repackaging. You get it? Now, the bread is not his. It's someone else's bread, but he's rebranding, repackaging it. Now, you can see that this other person that is repackaging the bread, first of all, does not have a product, but he's selling a brand. And now, the ones that have a very good brand, my brothers in Aba, they have their own beautiful product, yet they are putting another label on it. Now, how do you marry this? How do brand owners, how would you encourage them to build confidence in their own product? Because if you don't have confidence in your product. So why do you want to market it to me? Why do you want to sell it to me?
You're very right. Now I like storytelling. Of course.
Go on.
I remember in Rwanda, right? I saw these things you're wearing. They were. I have a laptop bag that I bought. I've been using it since then. I bought them from Rwanda in one of their arts villages, and I say how proud they are of these artifacts, of these items, right? Because they are locally made, right? We ourselves, are we proud to use our product? We need to be very proud to use our product, because at the end of the day, people come from outside the countries, right, to buy these things. But I like what we've been doing in terms of, you're wearing African wear, right? I like how over the years, which I really appreciate, over the years, we've been trying to adopt more of African wear, right? It's what is body communication is how many percent? I think 70% body language, and the rest is what you say. So yes, the things that we are projecting to the outside world, the things they are saying when they say, are we confident about using our own goods? Are we confident about using our locally made goods? And not just about confidence, it's also about building structures and infrastructure to support the people who are doing the work, right? The example you made about the Aba people, what structures do they have? Because I mean, these people are also trying to build business. They need funding, they need all of that. They need, right, to do the things that they need to do. Do they even have the training? Do they even have the understanding of what impacts these actions would have on their business, right? Because we keep playing small if we don't know how much we are leaving on the table, if we don't know the value that we are leaving on the table. So then that's why training is important for us to do. We need to continue training, speaking about this, having workshops where these people can learn and understand the impact of these things, of these actions on their businesses.
All right, so if I might come in, what are the some of the communication mistakes that companies, of course, African companies make most often? Can you highlight some of them for us?
Well, number one is not preparing, like I said earlier, not being proactive. It's very important to be proactive when it comes to communications. And then I think not being proactive is as a result of, which brings me to my number two, as a result of not even valuing communications in the first place. So another mistake some organizations make is they don't see communications as their as a strategic role.
That's what I was coming to.
Yes, they don't see communications people as people who should be on the board. The people who should make decisions, right? Who should see before you make. In fact, before you make any decisions, these are the people who should look at these decisions and tell you that this is the right way to go. They are the people who are supposed to design your materials and all of that. So they should be in your decision making process. Most organizations don't make that. Sometimes some of them go ahead and decide this is what we want to do, and then show it at the desk of the communications person. So you've already built a bad product, or you've already made a bad decision, but you want the communications team to sugarcoat it. We are on TV, but I hope I can talk about it. Okay. Well, we were having this conversation in my business school about CBN, the recent CBN issues during the last administration, and we had this dilemma: how would a communications person have handled that naira swap thing? Okay. How would the communications team have handled that? Because at the end of the day, the decision has been made. I would ask myself: was the communications team on the table when this decision was made? Were they present when the decision was made? How then could they resolve it when it has turned into a crisis? Yes, so one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is to put communications team on the sideline and make decisions and let them be there's a word I want to use for it, but it's coming. It's not coming. They make them executioners.
Okay.
instead of being the strategic thinker in the whole process.
Okay. All right. So, someone who has a small business who is just starting up, the person may not have a team of communicators. And of course, you still want to push a brand. You still want to. So, how will the person go about it? Someone who is just starting. And apart from, because right now everybody's just doing, even the social media thing, the content you are putting on social media, there are content that will actually sell an organization or a company or a product, whatever it is. And because you saw a particular company do it, because that's what we say on social media, everybody wants to follow the trend. Everybody's doing that. But yeah, let's do it. But for me, I feel that every brand should understand what works for them. So for an organization, for a product, for a brand that is just starting, a startup, how the person go on ensuring that, yes, my brand is known, ensuring that, yes, my product is patronized and all that.
How do small businesses,
Yes.
small and medium scale
Yes, who don't have communication team. Yes.
How do they handle communication? How do they handle communication?
Yeah.
Knowing that they are short on fund, they probably don't have the team to execute most of these grandiose things that we are talking about. Yes, I think it starts with the owner of the business, right?
Okay.
Seeing small businesses where the owners already understand what they want to do in terms of communicating, and they are not only just selling product; they are also putting themselves out there, going to conferences, building stakeholder engagement, building networks. Because at the end of the day, most of these networks are the ones that speak for you when you are not in the room. Yes, so it speaks for your product, it speaks for your brand when you are not there. So they are strategically already going out to build all of this network. Corporate communications, like I said, it's not just about what you're saying. It's also about what you're doing. It's mostly about what you're doing in the background. So stakeholder engagement is a big part of it. So a small business, then, the onus lies on the founders, on the executive, to start doing the groundwork of building networks, building stakeholder. And these things are not really expensive to do, as putting press releases every time you have a story to tell. Because, I mean, even media organizations don't want to accept stories unless it's coming from a big brand. Because, yes, is it newsworthy? That's the question. Is it newsworthy? And no matter how much money you have these days to, I mean, maybe you may not even be able to put some stories out there. I was doing a research about how the line between content, how the line between sponsored content and real news is really being blurred. But I know organizations who understand, media organizations who understand this, know how to know the essence of newsworthiness, right? And they are still keeping by it. So for small, medium businesses who want to grow, they can still sponsor, like I said, sponsor stories are still there. You can still use your SEO to build your platform. You can still use social media to build your platforms. They are affordable platforms that you can use to build your business, while also doing the groundwork of stakeholder engagement too. Then everything comes together. So it takes a founder or a CEO that truly understands what they are doing, what they want to achieve to build.
All right, thank you very much, Gloria, Kafui, Agbomadzi,
Thank you
for your insight. Thank you for joining us in Just Africa.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.